All right. You see the recording? Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you, Karen. Okay, good morning. I'm Julie Steinbeck from Claremont, California, and I'm the outreach coordinator for IWC. And this morning, I am the moderator of our special program leading up to and inspiring us all to honor and be involved in IWD through IWC. It's great to see all these faces. You are all here this morning already. And usually, as many of you know who come regularly, we do an introduction where we each do our name and location. We're not going to do that this morning, but we're going to ask that you put your name and location in the chat box. And a lovely tradition has also been started and continued here of putting the native lands, a land acknowledgement of where you live. So for example, Claremont, California here is on stolen Tongva land, and other people can do that as well. So if you will put that in the chat box so we know, we can look and see who you and where you are, that would be terrific. Many of us have been meeting every other week now for almost 2 years. It's really lovely to see and get to know you and to welcome new faces. I am seeing some new faces here. So this morning, as the announcement indicated, we do have a different kind of program in preparation and honor of IWD. And we are going to basically replicate a sample service that you can think about helping create in your congregation, including a sample sermon from our noble preacher here this morning. And so as we do in services, we start with a chalice lighting. And the chalice lighting words that Jerry Kennedy, who organized the program, chose were actually from the International Council of UU listings of chalice lightings. And this one had been written by Justina Boras, our UU stalwart woman leader in Warsaw, Poland, whom we asked if she could actually participate. She's checked in once or twice here, but the timing was wrong for her work day. And so I've asked Javine Hertz, a regular European participant, because Denmark is the closest country I could think of to Poland of our representatives. So Javine, would you start with a chalice lighting, please?
Yes, thank you. I'll light it first because I can't light and talk at the same time. So, may this chalice be a symbol of women's human rights. Let it show women that they are entitled to live their lives as they wish. Let it support women in their struggles to equity, and let it connect women in a friendly sisterhood. May this chalice give light and joy to all people who strive for a better, equitable world.
Thank you, Javine. And now we have a reading from Beth O'Connell in Paris, France. You're muted, Beth.
Yes, I know. Let me unmute. Okay, this reading is from a International Women's Day sermon by Reverend Julia in Transylvania. Many of you know her because she's hosted a number of our Tuesday gatherings. So this is from her sermon. Known, less known, or unknown individuals, women, heroes. It doesn't matter if they became heroes on a plane, at the university, in the pulpit, or at home. It doesn't matter if they became heroes as well-known experts, doctors, manual workers, inventors, mothers, or grandmothers. They all are heroes. They are the ones who, through their daily work, their deeds, and their wills, weave, knit, and patch the invisible web that holds the world in its corners.
Oh, thank you, Beth. that strikes me as particularly poignant in this time, in this pandemic era, where the frontline workers are the ones who are holding us together, and so many of them, as we know, are women. And now our sermon will be presented here by our stalwart promoter here, Denise Tracy, who is also on our outreach committee. And I just want to share a wonderful little networking story about how Denise and I first met. I live here in Claremont at a retirement community Pilgrim Place. And every year Pilgrim Place has this amazing festival in November. And Denise was coming out every year from Illinois to volunteer in the festival, because at one point she and her husband thought they were going to be moving here. And when I work the festival, I always wear my yellow Standing on the Side of Love, or now Side with Love t-shirt, as a way of promoting UUism. And I'm walking across the campus, and this woman yells out at me, "Unitarian, you're UU, who are you?" And anyway, that's how we met. That was 5 or 6 years ago. And every year when she comes out, we get together. And then I dragged her into this scene, and she's joined it with great joy and glee. And so that's how we met as women and UUs in yellow t-shirts. And some of you know her from the Midwest, because she's been a minister for over 40 years. She served a number of churches as a parish minister, and also indirectly as many churches as a district administrator for years, and is now a chaplain through the police department, as well as what do you call it? A fill-in preacher on Zoom for a bunch of churches. So anyway, here we are, Denise.
Thanks, Julie. I'm delighted to be here, and this sermon is called "Women Hold Up Half the Sky," which is an ancient Chinese saying. How old were you when you first noticed the differences in the world around you as far as gender was concerned? What did you notice first? That boys had different choices than girls? Did you see the choices as more or better? Did you notice that based on gender, certain career tracks were encouraged? In courses of study, did you read theories that justified or explained these differences? Did you accept what was presented? At some point, did you begin to wonder or question or challenge? I think I was born wondering. When I was 7, my sister came running across our house shouting to my mother, "Come quickly, Daddy is sick." We all ran, and there was my father coming out of the bathroom, zipping up his pants. My sister said, "Mommy, Daddy is sick. Daddy, take that thing out of your pants and show Mommy." So much for penis envy. Years later, when studying psychology in college, the professor began talking about Freud and penis envy, and I raised my hand and I said, "I don't think so." When I was 8, I was staying with my grandmother, and I told her how much I loved my name, Denise Diane Tracy. She said, "Well, don't like it too much." "Why?" I asked. She said, "Because you will lose your name when you get married. How do you think all these people in these families all get to have the same last name? How unfair." I decided that I would never marry if I had to give up my name. But my first boyfriend was named David Tracy, with the idea that if it was successful, I wouldn't have to change my name. It wasn't successful. It wasn't until I was in theological school that I discovered Lucy Stone, who had married Henry Blackwell in the 1800s, and she did not change her name. And I thought, so there, Grandma. When I was 9, I wanted to play an instrument, and I wanted to play the drums. I was told by the music program in my elementary school that boys play the drums, not girls. It was not until many years later at a UU summer camp that I took a women's drumming workshop, and I bought a drum of my own. When I was 10, I decided that I wanted to be a minister, and the responses were quite incredible. Yet in spite of many obstacles, here I am. All of us have our own stories of enlightenment. What is yours? What questions brought you to new understandings? How have you pursued your vision of the truth? And how have you been different as a result of this journey? These moments of questioning I call thread moments. You ask a question, it's like seeing a little piece of loose thread, and you begin to pull on it and pull and pull and pull. And pretty soon you have a whole pile of thread and nothing of substance at all. When we ask questions, things can come unraveled or be undone. My studies have led me to acquire new knowledge, new ways of understanding the world. And as a result, I have new truths because of some of this questioning or unthreading process. Reading and studying feminist theology or herstory, theology and theory, has helped me in my discovery. Author Merlin Stone wrote that once upon the earth, the form that was considered divine was the form of the female or a woman. Thousands of years ago, all over the earth, on every single continent, because of the mystery of birth, our women's bodies were considered holy. In back of me on my piano is about a half of a collection of goddesses from all over the world. I'm hoping you can see some of them. When my husband and I took our first trip to Greece, our tour guide discouraged us from going into a room in the Athens Museum. She said, "It's just full of a bunch of old stuff." I went in anyway, and there I found the double axes of the ancient goddess religion and giant holy figures of the female form. I learned then always to explore what the tour guides did not want me to see. In Riane Eisler's book, The Chalice and the Blade, she speaks about the fact that as humans put together, the idea that males were needed for procreation, the female became less important in the culture and the power shifted. The goddess and the chalice were demoted, and the male worship of the sword and the blade was uplifted. Elaine Pagel's book on the Essenes tells of the early Christian church and the sect of egalitarian followers of Jesus. Women and men were equal in the Essene sect of the early church. But as we all know, history is written by the winners, namely the early church fathers. The Essenes, with their equal roles for women and men, were invisible and all but forgotten until about 20 years ago with the work of Pagels. In the novel, The Mists of Avalon by Marion Zimmer Bradley, she tells the story of the fall of the goddess culture in England and Ireland when Morgaine and Merlin were diminished in power by the Christians Guinevere and Arthur. We all need to know the stories of feminist culture, its rise and fall, and hopefully we will see its rise again. Currently, there is no country on earth where women are equal. The countries closest to achieving gender equality are the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. But even there, women are only 80% equal. After the Nordics come Nicaragua, Cuba, and Burundi. The USA falls into 23rd place in terms of equality. The Nordic countries do better because they make it possible for men and women to share in child-rearing responsibilities with paid leave for both parents, for up to a year for each parent for each child. The Global Issues website says this: anywhere on earth, the more that women are equal, all the people, men, women, and children fare better in that society. What does this mean? Where women control our fertility, where women control our rights in divorce, where there are laws against violence against women, where women are involved in politics and have full voting rights, where women have the right to hold elected office, where economic parity is improving for women. In these cultures, all women, men, and children have better quality of living than in any place on earth where women are not equal. Anywhere on earth where women lead lives that are impoverished mentally, spiritually, or physically, so is that country and all of its residents impoverished. One of the reasons I am committed to the International Women's Convocation is that this is an organization that advocates for the improved lives of women. When I join IWC meetings, I listen to the concerns of women in India, in Bolivia, in Transylvania, in France, and the United States. The IWC reminds me that I must continue to work to improve the lives of women and therefore all people on earth. When the IWC chooses to support a project, for instance, collecting money so that girls in Kenya can have sanitary supplies so that they can go to school even during the time when they are menstruating, or creating a fund for COVID supplies to keep the virus from spreading in both India and Kenya, these projects improve and save lives. The IWC 2 years ago was granted consultative status as a part of the United Nations. We have a delegation that works with the UN's Commission on the Status of Women. We have 3 outstanding projects that have received international notice and acclaim. Our leadership training program for women in Transylvania was so successful, it was also launched in both India and Bolivia. Our women's organizations in both the Philippines and in India have developed and conduct recognized programs on domestic violence and its prevention, educating women about our rights and helping to develop protective strategies. These sessions are important, and they also have different sessions to engage men so that they will overcome the cultural acceptance and norms of beating and abusing women. The 3rd UN program is the education of women about climate change in both Bolivia and Guatemala. These are our programs, sponsored all over the globe, and we improve women and men and children's lives. These programs are noteworthy efforts of the IWC members, and they are supported by our fundraising as well as uplifting our own awareness. The IWC depends on UU congregations and individual women supporting these programs. Each March, in honor of International Women's Day, which is March 8th, or for the month of March, we ask congregations to organize a Share the Plate or special collection so that we expand our resources and that we might improve the lives of women all around the world. If you wish to select another month or another date of celebration, such as Mother's Day, we certainly support any programmatic creativity that you have to offer, which would support IWC programs. The program today is not our usual Tuesday program. Today, we want to ask you to go to your congregation and ask for a Share the Plate or a special collection to support the IWC. Ask for a Sunday worship program nearest to March 8th to be on women as a way of supporting the equality of women in our and your world. Once, look at the goddesses in back of me and think, once upon a time, all over the earth, women's lives and our very bodies were considered divine and holy. Every time we improve the quality of life for women in our world, we improve the lives of the country and the culture itself. When we do this, our world becomes better. Wherever women are equal, all the people's lives are better. The IWC improves the equality and the quality of all the lives we touch. Please consider supporting our effort. Amen, shalom, salam, and blessed be.
Whew. Thank you, Denise.
Oh, you're welcome.
And Beth, we have another reading from you. You're muted.
I have to unmute. I'm unmuted now. Okay. Yes, there is another reading. Let me get it. Okay. All right. Okay. Being a woman is good. And indeed, it is good. Not despite its difficulties, but because of them. This makes the female soul especially brilliant. Remember and be strengthened in the belief that you are needed, that you are important. There is a need for that unnameable force that flows in your veins. There is a need for your everyday service, whatever that may be. And I know that your service, in the strange reality in which we find ourselves today, is harder than ever.
Well, good morning. I'm Jerry Kennedy, and I want to be sure everybody can hear me. Yes? Okay, good. I'm currently the treasurer for the International Women's Convocation, and thank you for those beautiful words, Denise. I loved that. So the purpose of having this service so far away from International Women's Day or Mother's Day, which are next spring, is that we know that many churches plan if they do a share the plate once a month or whatever their pattern is, they plan that out far in advance. And so we wanted to raise up for you all, that if you would communicate with your own congregations to see if you could get the International Women's Convocation on their list of folks that would receive some of the Share the Plate funds. All of the readings today were taken from materials that we sent out to churches who did participate with the program for 2021. And if you do find out that your church is going to be providing International Women's Day program, we put together new materials every single year. Helps with sermons, helps with readings, chalice lightings, and all those other pieces. Or if you need someone maybe to talk a little bit about International Women's Convocation for just a couple of minutes, and you don't have anyone who feels comfortable in your congregation doing that, just let us know. And we can, nowadays, we can probably Zoom in if the church is still doing hybrid, or we might be able to find someone who lives in your vicinity that can come and talk for you. I will say that we are a 501c3, so that because that's a requirement for churches to be able to donate to. And, this is one, although our work is mainly in the grant giving, we also we have expenses just like every other business. So the donations from these collections help pay our one staff person who's paid, which is Jofi. And excuse me, we have those typical business expenses, church, web design, Zoom costs, all those insurance and stuff like that. So if you are able to have your church do a collection, and it doesn't have to be around International Women's Day, we have a church in Los Gatos, California, that their service is coming up this coming Sunday. So if you can, let Jofi know in advance so we can be sure and get the materials out to you. And if you have any questions or need any help at all, just get in touch with Jofi. And I have one little last pitch. Excuse me. It's early here in California or Washington, wherever the heck I am. We have a Faithify campaign that's running right now. You can find out about it on our website. It is to help women in rural Guatemala plant fruit trees, both for food and for soil, to prevent soil erosion. And that campaign only has about just a little less than a week to go. So if you would like to donate to that Faithify campaign, please check on the website. There'll be a link. and you can get there and learn much more about the program itself.
Jerry,
Yes.
it's
Yes.
important for people to know that we have a member who has offered a match.
That is true.
Anybody, whatever you give will be doubled. It's really quite a wonderful, wonderful gift that we've been given so that we can help this community. The communities have fruit trees. So $25 becomes 50, 100 becomes 200. So
Yes, and it is a very worthy cause. The more funds we can raise, the more trees that can be planted. So
Can I just say something? I'm a retired English as a second language teacher in Louisville, Kentucky. And I was teaching at the Newcomers Center. This was for middle and high school students who had just gotten off the plane. So none of them knew much English. And in one of the students that I had was from this part of Guatemala. And so he told me, so when I asked him what language he spoke, I assumed that he spoke Spanish. He said, no, Miss Thomas, Quiche. And I noticed that he was shunned by the other Guatemalan students who spoke Spanish, and they were really considered as outsiders. And when I came to the part where I was teaching him the months of the year, he was very puzzled. And I realized in that society, they didn't need to know the months of the year. They needed to know when it was going to rain, when it was going to be more cold and was time to plant their crops. That's all they needed to know. They didn't have watches. They didn't need to know the day of the week. They needed to know only things that had to do with nature. And he was just the dearest, dearest boy. I was so happy to have met him because I knew nothing about this culture and I learned about it. So thank you for letting me give you that information.
Oh, thank you, Jackie, for sharing that with us. That really expands our understanding of the Faithify campaign that we're supporting and the trees that we're helping to grow. Thank you so much. So, it's obviously we didn't plan this service to fill a whole hour. Or we didn't think that it might not fill a whole hour. And as most of you know, every other Tuesday, we go into breakout rooms to discuss a chosen topic. Well, we don't have the expertise to do that today because our stalwart executive director, Zsófi Strunitsky, is not with us. You've noticed that, obviously. Most of you have been with us before. Zsófi is right now in Poland. She and her husband, Dean Dalton, run a tour program, and they're doing a tour that's centered around the Chopin. It's a arts and culture tour program that they run. And this program is this week or 10 days that they're together is centered around the Chopin competition in Warsaw. And anyway, so that's why she's not with us this morning. But so with the time that we have and the lack of expertise to go into a breakout room, I'm going to suggest that we have some sharing with the whole group structured in this kind of way. First of all, I want to welcome, I see that there are a couple women. Nancy Rhodes says she's her first time here. And Mary Kerwin is a face and name that I don't remember seeing before. So welcome to you. And I want to suggest that we share a few stories about how the IWD service has happened in your congregation, if it has, to inspire those who haven't. And I'm going to pick on the couple that I know, starting with Carol Cook. You just did it, did you not? Would you mind sharing with us what you did? And I'm happy that Carol, you're here this morning because of the fact that you did it not in March. And so this is an example of how it can be done anytime, basically. Thank you, Carol.
Well, first of all, I want to say that the reason we can't do it in March is because the beginning of March is when we have our annual partner church collection, special collection. And so it just doesn't work out for March. And so, and I'm not in charge of picking the dates. So I do put down suggested dates, but I don't know which one we're going to get. So anyway, we did have the service. It was really actually a service on transcendentalism. So our minister, after he gave most of his talk, he also raised up the role of women as ministers, which is something that kind of started with the transcendentalists, which I hadn't known about or had thought about before that. And mainly the focus on the IWC was provided by me. I had something that I had written the previous year when we did the special collection from the IWC, and I passed it by Sophie, and she suggested some updates, and I put those in, and I'm still waiting to hear how much money we raised. I hope I will find out maybe tomorrow. Anyway, I hope that it was really successful and that we raised a good amount for the IWC. And I did promote the Faithify, so I don't know if anybody contributed to that as a result of what I said.
And speaking of amounts of money, so my congregation is quite small. We're down to 65 right now in this pandemic era. We had been for years at about 120 members. And over the years, the collections have ranged as high as $600, which for us is quite a large share of the plate collection. And last year in the pandemic era, it was not even $250. So, but every little bit helps. So no matter what the size of your group or your congregation, every little bit helps. So
Julie, I'd like to say what I did last year.
Yes, please.
I'm a relatively new person to the IWC, and I thought, okay, I'm retired. I don't have a church of my own, but I preach at different churches. And so during the month of March, I preached in 3 different churches, and I wrote them, I think in December or January, and asked if I gave my honorarium as a match, would they advertise and collect money to match my honorarium? And so in each of the churches, it was $250. And one church, I think, almost doubled that. In other words, they collected $500. So my $750 in 3 congregations came in well over, I think it was close to $2,300. And it was like, well, it worked. And so, if you provide a program for a congregation, you could ask them to take the money that they might normally pay a speaker, and you can do a similar thing. So I felt really good about that, because I didn't know whether it was going to work. I just thought, okay, well, I'll give this a try. But anyway, whatever creative idea you have, try it and then let us know, because all of us are looking for ways to support the IWC.
Okay, other experiences. I know Carol's done a lot of preaching around IWD, and Carol, if you would like to share any particular handy hints or suggestions, this is a great moment. And anyone else think about what you'd like to share?
Yes, excuse me. Am I unmuted? Do you hear me?
Yes, you are.
Good. Okay. I've done similar things occasionally. I more than Denise, I sometimes want to keep my little bit of money that I get from preaching at other congregations in my retirement. But I have done that occasionally, and the direct appeal you can make when you preach is really important, but that can come from lay people and from members as well, not just ministers that go around. I have had the sermons that I have done for International Women's Day often certainly are about women, but when I do one in the same congregation the following year, it's good to have the opportunity to preach a little bit about um, international Unitarian Universalism. It's really amazing how little some congregations know about the fact that we have active groups in Philippines and India, and they're fascinated with the idea that we have those congregations. And so preaching, bringing those kinds of stories are eye openers for our congregations, as well as the eye openers we can bring about women's experience, both domestic and international. So I think that's what I can offer at the moment. Thank you. This was a really good idea to do, to share this idea of bringing IWC to our congregations. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you, Carol. And I'm just noticing in the chat, Peggy Sue points out that I suggest ICUUW first inspire and then ask for funding. And I'm reminded of the times that I've given the pitch on our annual service about talking about the programs that we do, the leadership development programs, the domestic violence programs. And I particularly remember coming back from the UN in New York in 2014 when one of our members, Olga from Bolivia, had done this amazing stance before the High Commissioner for Human Rights, and that she was speaking out for the needs of Bolivian women. And so I was able to I remember standing there and going like this and saying, this is what Olga did on our behalf. And so, and I think that actually, I don't remember the amounts, that was 2014. But, giving those kinds of stories, a story always inspires people. And I also want to point out, point out that Peggy wrote in the chat here, ICUUW, we do have two names. And historically, it goes back to originally being called ICUUW, International Convocation of UU Women. And then the International Council of UUs took issue with that and pressured us to change our name to IWC. And we still actually use ICUUW because that's the name of the organization that we are in that is registered with the United Nations. We are in consultative status with the UN, and we were originally incorporated under that name, and we're still with that name, and it's complicated and too much of a hassle to change, I guess, or something. Anyway, we do have those two names, so just so you know, but IWC is the more simple version. Okay, so back to sharing. Who else has done a service that they would like to share? Beth.
Yeah, I just want to point out to everybody that, we have a YouTube channel, IWC, and there's some good videos there. There's an especially good one that Jofi did on our 10th anniversary, kind of summing up what's IWC and the kinds of programs we're involved with. So that's a good one for sharing. And just to say that here in Paris at the UU Fellowship here in Paris, every March for the past couple of years, I've done like a little thing in the service, because the service always has a bit of a focus on women because it's the month of International Women's Day. So I've always done a little bit about IWC. One year we did do a plate collection. Last year we didn't because of COVID and money was tight. But lo and behold, is like once you start planting the awareness of IWC and as Carol was saying, the whole idea of UU as an international movement, and you start planting that. And I was approached by our worship committee to do the March service. So the March service in Paris will be all about International Women's Day and IWC. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm very happy that the awareness is seeping through. This awareness is seeping through, and yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you. Speaking of international, I do want to acknowledge that we have a representative here almost at midnight in Japan from Tokyo. Peggy Canada is with us, and Eliza Lamar from India. And I don't know that I've seen anyone from Transylvania this morning.
Melinda was here. She isn't
yeah.
any longer, but she was here in the beginning.
Right. And those of you who are new, Marion and let's see, Nancy, usually we do go into breakout rooms, like I said. So next time, come and join us that way and get to know us even better. Anyone else have some IWD stories to share with us? Yes, I see a hand. Jeannie.
I want to ask a question, and I'm sure someone knows this. Why March 8th is picked as International Women's Day? There must have been some kind of event in history or something.
Who's got that answer? You know what, when you say that, the first answer that comes to mind is I have a friend in Novosibirsk, Siberia, who I met at an international conference some years ago, and in Russia, the International Women's Day has been known for many years. Although she said that it was an excuse for men to get drunk. So that's one frame of reference going back into history.
They need an excuse.
But I think, isn't it Carol, do you?
Yeah, International Women's Day does go back more than 100 years, and it was labor related. So I'm not totally certain whether there was one particular strike or something like that happened in March, might have been, but it really did grow out of labor movements. And it was stronger in communist countries for a long time, which has made the United States a slow adopter through the years of it. It was very much something in communist countries from the 1920s through the 1960s, 1970s. The United Nations finally picked it up in the early 1970s, and gradually it's been more adopted around the world, and it is adopted around the world now. But it goes back a long ways. But Soviet Union was more active in it in the early years.
Okay, I'm seeing Javine's hand and Jacqueline's hand. Javine?
Hey, I just said a little story about International Women's Day. I moved to Denmark in 1980. And in the mid 80s, I was working, I met a Swedish woman, a colleague, and we became friends. And I visited her in Sweden and in Stockholm. And she told me that on International Women's Day, she always had a luncheon for her women friends and what they did and so forth. And I had actually never heard of it, and she had been sending me, happy International Women's Day. And I was like, okay, what's this? Because it's not such a big thing in Denmark, but I guess in Sweden it is. So I thought that was kind of a nice idea to think of having a luncheon where you invite women to discuss things for International Women's Day.
Oh, that is, yeah. Jacqueline.
I just actually looked this up, and now I understand why I had never heard of this in the US, but when I was living in France for 30 years, it was a really big deal. After women gained suffrage in the Soviet Union in 1917, the year of the Bolshevik Revolution, IWD, International Women's Day, was made a national holiday on March 8th. So it dates back to 1917, like Carol was saying. It was subsequently celebrated on that date by the socialist movement and communist countries. So it seeped into the rest of Europe, where very often there were socialist communist coalitions, as there were in France, especially in the 30s. That's why we have the long holidays. That's why women get time off before they have children. And a lot of time off afterwards. All that was started during that communist socialist coalition in the 30s in France. So because we were so anti-communist / socialist in the US, they did not want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. And now people are starting to talk about it, but they have no idea where it started. And I was wondering, why isn't it celebrated in the US? So now I have my answer. Thanks to your question, Jeannie. Thank you so much for asking that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add one more thing. I have been trying to get my UU church interested in EUU, European Unitarian Universalist, because I was so much a part of that when I was in Paris, but they never bit the bait. I spoke to them about it. I never made a presentation about it though, because I thought some of them would love to go to those wonderful retreats they have. Now the retreats are online, and if you've never been to an online retreat, I can only say it is really wonderful. I don't know how they, like we have stayed together because of COVID, and the EUU retreats have stayed together, and certainly they will be back in person. But when I was going to Denver with my grandson this summer, I don't know anybody in Denver, and I was going to stay there for 4 days. So I looked up the UU fellowships in Denver, and I looked up, looked a little bit about what they were, what the churches, what the churches look like. And I picked up my telephone and I said, my name is Jackie Thomas, and I'm calling from Louisville, and I'm a UU, and I'm very interested in finding somebody to tell me something for my 11-year-old grandson. Well, it just so turned out that the fellow who answered the phone, who was the church secretary, he said, my partner is a tourist guide for Denver, and he's going to contact you this afternoon, and he's going to tell you all these places that you can take your grandson. He also found me a wonderful hotel in a very safe neighborhood that was not too expensive. And so I would encourage all of us to use this wonderful fellowship that we belong to and not hesitate to call. And in fact, a good friend of mine who's very active in EUU, Martha Hicks, she and her husband are going to a place called Nashville, Indiana. And I told her she has some business to do there. And I said, why don't you contact the UU fellowship? They were so happy to talk to her. They said, oh, we can help you. We know that there's something has to do with a realtor thing that she's doing. And they said, oh, yes, we know some really nice realtors. And so this is an amazing, amazing fellowship. And sometimes I think we're really closed in with the people in our own fellowships, and we don't realize that these others are. Imagine if somebody asked you about that from your fellowship, you'd say, well, of course I'll call somebody from Louisiana or Texas or Vermont, and you'd be very happy to pass on some information to them. So I thought this was so interesting. And since we've had this discussion, I plan on writing a little thing for my newsletter. My congregation has recently changed their name from Thomas Jefferson Unitarian Universalist to All Peoples, a Unitarian Universalist congregation. And so that was a pretty big deal because they've been around since the 70s in Louisville. So I'm going to write something for the newsletter and say, don't forget this wonderful network we belong to. Believe me, the people who are in the Catholic Church really use this because they have all these retreat sites all over the US, and they know how to use that network. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. That's a terrific testimonial. Mary Darrow, I saw your hand go up. Would you like to share with us? And Peggy, I've got you next. Mary Darrow is in my congregation. I'm happy to see
Yeah,
her.
it was already answered about the, I forget who answered it. Was it Beth? Whoever was answered about how it came about in March.
Oh, okay, great, thanks. Peggy, tell us about IWD in Tokyo.
Well, it's always encouraging for me to join this group, although it's late for us here in Japan. I just wanted to say that we are a tiny fellowship, the Unitarian Fellowship of Tokyo, but we've been around for more than 50 years, not with me, but it's been around. And we're basically expats with about a third Japanese, very small and struggling. So if anyone is coming to Japan, please contact me. I am a cultural historian, art historian with lots of ideas. I'm not a travel agent, but we would love to have UU visitors. For example, we had Barbara and Kim Beach come through, for example, and actually come to our fellowship. I have been to one General Assembly, the one in New Orleans. And one of the things that really surprised me was the lack of any real international focus. Although I understand that there are so many problems, you might say, in the US, and New Orleans itself is full of history and full of very interesting things. But you know, I'd love to see more connections, and I worry that we're losing some of them, not just with COVID, but with some of the economic and merging of partner churches with the ICUU, for example. So please contact me.
And I just want to add that she's absolutely, she backs up her invitation with actions. In fact, I met her because when I was in Tokyo and had made the connection with Kathy Matsui, whom some of you know because she's been involved with IWC for over the years. She heard that I was there and she contacted me and said, I'm the convener, I want to meet you. And we got together, we went to the Kabuki, we had a great time, and we've been connected ever since. So, you know, if travel ever does open up to allow one to, any of you to go to Tokyo, Peggy's your woman. And
Peggy, tell us what that hanging sign behind you says.
Right. Peggy, did you hear that?
It was it says Happy Halloween. Forgive me, it didn't come down because I did a talk about, well, the British Celtic possible origins of Halloween. Well, how far back they go is maybe a little problematic, but it's great fun to talk about, for example, the pagan tradition of Samhain as being picked up by Romans as the Roman Empire became Christian, and then the early Christian church making All Hallows Day, All Souls Day, essentially October 31st, November 1st and 2nd. So that's what I was doing, and had put up the banner. We had a discussion about that with a small group I belong to.
Okay, thanks, Peggy. And I'm seeing one other, Denise in a second, but I'm wanting to ask Sylvia from Canada, simply because this is another country represented here, for any experience of IW, of awareness of International Women's Day there in Edmonton. And if there isn't any, you can say that, but I'd love to have a Canadian perspective added here.
Unmute.
I'm not sure why Audrey Brooks isn't on this morning. She's my friend, and of course that's how I got involved as well. And so she has, she and I have put on the IWC as to be one of the share the plates for next year in our church. So we'll be doing that. It will be replacing the ICUU, which I'm very sad. It sounds like it's disbanding. And I thought it was essential for our international perspective. But before that, I was involved in the IARF, the International Association for Religious Freedom, but that's, as you know, isn't specifically Unitarian. It's all religions are associated with that. So I'm not sure what more I can add.
My question was actually about International Women's Day consciousness in Canada, or there in Edmonton, in recent history. Is there an awareness?
Well, at one of the matriarchs of our church is Ruth Patrick, and so she used to arrange something at one time that I guess that really that's not way back in the 1990s, but we need to start doing more now, and I'm sure we will be because Audrey Brooks is on it. So
cool. Denise, you had another comment?
Well, I just think that whatever we do, I mean, when we adopted our girls from Thailand, Mother's Day in Thailand is the birthday of the Queen. It's not like a day in May. And that's when I realized that you can celebrate anything you want on any day that you want, and it's just fine. So if you have an idea of celebrating, you know, the IWC on some other day, some other month, I don't think it matters. I think what matters is educating our congregations and ourselves to what we can do to help women around the world and support the IWC, whether it's IWD or any other day. So, you know, I just pick something, dream about it, and go with it, I guess is what I would say.
Oh, Denise, that's a perfect wrap up. It is. We're running up against our hour here. And so we're going to wrap this up with Jerry closing us out with the chalice extinguishing reading. Jerry.
Thank you. These words are also from the IWB words, and they're from our UU United States president right now, Susan Frederick Gray. As we leave this sacred space, may we remember gratitude for this gift of life. In the midst of turmoil and pain, may we still be attentive to the beauty and the preciousness of all life, to wonder and to marvel at its presence. May we kindle more love, more joy, and more song into our hearts and into our days. May we be led out in peace, and may we give back love.
Thank you, Jerry. And this is a final reminder for our next regular meeting will be 2 weeks from today, October 26th, and we will be back to the regular format of breakout rooms and sharing in the small groups. And again, let's see, Mary Kerwin and Nancy Rhodes, please make sure you put your email that we have you so we get you on our mailing list. And I see also Gretchen, a name here that I don't see a face. Gretchen, no last name. Gretchen, who are you? Welcome. The only Gretchen I know in the UU world is in Australia. I don't know if this is Gretchen Thomas, but anyway, Gretchen, whoever you are, welcome. And see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you.